Now, when you hear the term DEI, what do you think? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where did that language come from? We're not really sure, but I believe it came from a court case where the court said that that is a compelling state interest, and therefore schools, colleges, and universities could look at those factors as a reason, as a legitimate basis for deciding to admit or not admit students into college. But diversity and equity also has morphed from that, expanded from that to a conversation about who gets to be at the table, whether we're talking schools, universities, whether we're talking in the corporate setting, whether we're talking about who gets to do contracting with the state government, the county government, the federal government. But now when you hear the term diversity, equity, and inclusion, it, in my mind, to my thinking, is a placeholder for Black. So to the extent that there are attacks, there are coordinated and consistent and vicious attacks on DEI, really this is just a clever way of discussing the issue of race in the United States of America. And the people that are pushing back against diversity, equity, and inclusion are pushing back against Black people primarily, now other groups, Latinos, women, and the progress that women have made in terms of also being invited to the corporate conversation, also being considered to be worthy of holding positions of high authority such as CEOs and presidents of colleges and universities and so on and so forth. But make no mistake about it, this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion at its heart is a pushback to perceived Black progress that was achieved at the expense of white people. And more to the point, more narrowly, at the expense of white men. But let's talk about the statistical truth, it's the statistical reality that exists. I remember back in the year 2000 when, at that time, Jeb Bush was the governor of the state of Florida. And his attack on, at that time, it was not called diversity, equity, and inclusion, but affirmative action. His attack on affirmative action was called the One Florida Initiative. And I remember traveling around the state of Florida, speaking to various different community groups. Some of them were bankers. Some of them were white bankers who were very much anti-affirmative action. And some of them were white male government contractors. And they were talking about how unfair it was for the government to set aside contracts for women and minorities. But I knew the numbers. The numbers were this, that the majority of the contracts that were being handed out to white male contractors, white male contractor business, was 98%. 98% of all of the contracts that were being handed out by the government were being handed out to companies that were owned and operated and managed and controlled by white males. So what I said to these gentlemen who were giving me a considerable amount of pushback, I said, listen, I don't know this for sure, but I think I'm gonna get with some people in my community and we'll talk about this gross unfairness that's happening to you. And I think I might be able to persuade them to take your percentage and we'll give you ours. If you think that the 2% that we're getting is grossly unfair to you and you're at an extreme disadvantage, well, we will be happy to switch. To that, they had no response. It reveals something though, right? It revealed that there are people who think that if Black people, if women, if Latinos get one crumb from the government, if they get to participate in the prosperity of this country, in any meaningful way, that somehow the system is turned on its head. Because for them, the world was created by a white man. That's what actually many Christian Bibles, that's how they portray, that's how they picture God, literally, as a white man, as an older white man. And now, of course, white people aren't the only people in the world who convey their image of God in images that look like them, but I'm just saying, there are some people who literally think that God is a white man. And so therefore, everything that is good, everything that is desirable, everyone that is at the top of any food chain, whether we're talking corporate or we're talking military, whether we're talking any paramilitary force, or we're talking school systems, university systems, it has to be a white male on the top. If you know about Project 2025, one aspect of Project 2025 is this idea that there are some rogue, extremely liberal prosecutors who are not willing to prosecute violent criminals. Now that's a false narrative, but if you look at it, they're talking about black prosecutors around the country in places like Chicago, places like Philadelphia, in places like Baltimore, and right here in Orlando, there's some who believe, and I'm not talking about what I think, I'm talking about what I read in the local newspaper and what I've seen in the national conversation. There are some people who believe that if it's a black person, and especially a black female in charge of anything, then that's the result of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that person could not possibly be qualified. That person could not possibly be intelligent enough to do the job, committed to the notions of law enforcement enough. So all of these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion lets us know that we still have a lot of work to do in the United States of America. We still have a lot of distrust. We still have a lot of racial animus. And if we don't do the work is going to do us in. If we don't control this malignancy, if we don't address this problem that has gone away and found its way back to us, if we don't stand up for what is right, if America does not embrace these principles that were codified in the Declaration of Independence, and then much more so formally in the U.S. Constitution, if we don't embrace those principles, if we don't live them out, then I'm concerned that America is going to go the way of all other great empires. I'm concerned that America is going to be a victim of the imperial cycle. What is the imperial cycle? If you average the lifespan of most empires that have ever existed in the history, the recorded history of mankind, you'll see that it's about 250 years. After 250 years, they can't hold it together. They just start fighting with themselves, not someone from the outside. They begin to completely abandon and ignore their foundational principles, their laws. When I look at what's happening in America, and I take into consideration that next year, 2026 will be 250 years, I'm concerned because it seems like we're following a very distinct, very observable, very predictable pattern. We've got a lot of work to do. This current attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion indicates to us, to me, that we haven't solved much of anything. We've just simply learned to mask it. That we haven't dealt with this issue of hate and control and manipulation and domination and oppression. We haven't put that to bed because we haven't been willing to do the very difficult work, but the very necessary work that it takes. I'm up for the conversation. Now, as a black man and as black people, I encourage you, we've got to get into the conversation. We've got to have the conversation. We've got to stand up and we got to speak up. Just a few things that I'm thinking about. Tell me what you're thinking.